how do we manage the transactions in our relationship? Okay. Now, a gentleman called Eric Byrne, who is a Canadian citizen, he is credited with having, he was a psychotherapist, and he is, I think Canadian, but he was an American citizen. Okay, so he's credited with having created this whole model. When he would do group therapies, etc., he bases all his experiences. He kind of built a model in terms of all the concepts of transaction analysis. Now, the point is, though it came from, psychotherapy and clinical work and psychiatric work, but, the whole theory of transaction analysis came up from the idea that it's possible for people to take control over how they behave in their relationships. Okay, and how they manage their relationships. So he really kind of Byrne really kind of gave people the opportunity to see that, look, it's possible for you to healthily manage your relationships, however deeply burnt up or or in a bad state the relationships have been turned into. And so today it started off, while it started off as a social psychiatry tool, today it is well respected as a training tool, as a tool for us, and also for us to use in the coaching and the counseling space. Okay, so we are going to talk about that. We're going to learn some of the concepts related to it. And really, if you look at this, these are some of the concepts that are there. We're not going to deal with all of them, but essentially what it says is, on the overt meaning, out there, there are certain behaviors that you can see in the way people handle their relationship. And they may be doing something called games or time structuring, and we'll talk about some of these, basis the scope of your course. We'll talk about some of this today, but essentially underneath the games we play, there are certain scripts that we have written for ourselves in our life. There are certain life positions that we have taken, and there are certain ego states that exist, like Asit spoke about, right? And what are those? What does that mean? Like I said, we'll talk about. These are some of the broad concepts, and these ego states are not necessarily overt. They are covert. They are in the sense that these are, these are states that we have adapted, or what is also called contamination of states in us as individuals, which are below. So if you look at the conscious and subconscious broadly that we're speaking about, some of, these are also happening at a subconscious level. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Now, if you look at this, therefore, what is the ego state? Now, ego states is essentially something that we're going to talk about as something that is occupying both in a way, it is the way we are showing up as. It's a system of feeling and behavior patterns that we show up as in the way we communicate with people. Okay, and ego states manifest as certain behaviors. They can manifest in specific places. There can be an ego state that you can have with your wife. There can be an ego state that you can have with your children. There can be another ego state that you may have with your boss or your subordinate or your mother. But essentially, behind these, sorry, is there a chat going on? Okay. But essentially, it's possible to identify what is this ego state that's going on. We all know the concept of ego. Burns says that there is a particular ego state that comes in based on our conditioning, based on our childhood experiences, based on our past references, and we tend to adopt them and adapt to them in our interactions. So we're going to talk about that. And now, there basically, if you see, transaction analysis is based on two notions, okay? One is that all of us have three sides or three ego states. One is a parent state, one is a child state, and one is an adult state. That all of us have these in them, okay? And the second as a notion of transaction analysis is that these ego states are conversing with one another in our transactions. There is a conversation happening internally. There is also a conversation happening externally with people. Okay. So for example, what would be an example of a parent and here the image shows is not showing the adult, but essentially I'll talk to you about all the three ego states. Okay. Let's say you are talking to your child and you tell the child that go and clean your room. What is the ego state from which you're talking to the child? Go and clean your room.
Parent to child.
Parent to child. If the child says, well, you know what, right now, let me complete this task because it's very important that I send it out to my teacher or my office or whatever, depending on the age. And after that, I'll certainly clean my room. I understand why you're asking me to do so. What is the state from which the child is talking?
Adult to adult.
Adult to adult. Okay. Anyone else?
It looks more like a child to a child because it's not addressing a person who's giving them orders, and it's not like that. It's like talking to a friend is what I feel. Just like as if talking to another friend who's at the same way. Don't bother, I'll do it a little later. It's okay.
Okay.
Talking from adult state.
Adult state. Anyone else?
Adult to parent.
Adult to parent. Okay. Okay.
Adult to adult.
Adult to adult. Okay. Now look at the different assumptions that are being made, right? That there is either an adult to adult conversation happening. Someone said there's a child to child, that it seemed, Karthik said that, right? Karthik
Yes.
seemed to have picked up that there is something almost dismissive, that, okay, I'll do it later, right? That's what you picked up from what I said. And at the same time, someone said it's an adult to a parent, right? Now, the point is that if you recollect what I said, you know what, I have to complete this because I have a time deadline. I'll certainly, look at the cleaning up the room. I understand why you want to do this. Karthik. Now look at this and see what is it, the ego state from which the child is talking.
It's not exactly a child to child. What I meant was peer to peer.
Yeah.
It could be like, for example, if my wife comes and says, okay, see, look at this bedroom, it's so untidy, So then I say, I have something to do at this moment. So let me finish this and then get back to it, right? So it's the same analogy is what I applied there.
Yeah.
So it's like a peer to peer. So
Sure. And that peer to peer, in that assumption, in underlying assumption is that both of us are equal. Am I right in picking that up from you, Karthik?
That's right, exactly.
and that we are equal, that what else is the assumption being made there, Karthik?
The assumption is I'm not taking it as an order. So I am ready to do it. There's no problem at all. I'm ready to do it. But since I'm engaged in something, I'm just telling you that it is not even a permission. I'm just telling you that, yes, I will be doing it, and it will be done a little later.
Sure.
That's all.
So the assumption is that I take responsibility for what I need to do. You also said that I'm not necessarily doing it because someone may be ordering me or something like that. So in a sense, it's not based on a fear of authority, right?
Absolutely.
And also that, therefore whatever I can commit to what I need to do, and I can manage this communication, right? Because I don't change my decision because you asked me to do it. Now, all of those assumptions, Karthik, are essentially what in the transaction analysis space is called the voice of an adult. The communication from an adult, right? An adult, the peer-to-peer is like an adult to adult. Are we all clear? Is everyone picking up that from what we just shared with Karthik? Yeah. So, however, let's say if the same child had said, why should I do it? You're always interfering with my playtime. What is the response that which state has the child given that response from?
Frustration.
Parent to
Child.
It is parental reflection.
Probably.
Child to parent.
Dominant.
Parent to child, probably. Like a parent to child.
So the parent spoke to the child, go clean the room. The child is saying, why should I do it? You're always interfering with my playtime. Now, so the second person, the child, which is the state that he is playing from? Someone is saying parent, someone is saying child. Who is saying parent? What is the reason for him?
Because it's like a child is not normally a person who will order a parent. On the other hand, when the child is going to ask a similar kind of a question to the parent, why don't you come and play with me? Then the parent says, no, I am right now doing something. Don't disturb me, right? So it's a similar kind of analogy is what I drew here, wherein the child says, no, I'm not ready to do it now. Why do you want to always ask me to? Why do you want me to do it always? No, so that kind of.
Okay, now let's have someone who says from a child. Yeah, who's speaking?
Yeah, Asit here, can it be a critical parent?
Can it be a critical parent? So is the critical parent responding back to the parent? But what about a rebellious child saying, why should I do it? You're always interfering with my playtime.
Rebellious child, okay.
Yes.
So that it's definitely belonging to the child category, simply because it doesn't have the maturity to understand the command of the parent, and it's being rebellious. So it's not in the same platform of either receiving the command or even executing it. So it's a child.
Right.
When there's a transaction, are you not analyzing both parties or just one party? When there's a transaction, you have to analyze the parent's response and child's response both, right?
Certainly. And you have to, right? I mean, but right now we're just examining one particular communication from one person to the other, right? The parent said, go to the room. All of you guys already agreed that it was a parent to child communication. Right? You had already said that was a parent to child, right? Go clean the room, right? And then the child said, but why should I clean it? Why should I do it? You're always interfering. And so we are, so we're having this response. And Nama, is that how I pronounce your name?
Naama.
Wow, that's such a beautiful name. Naama. Okay. So Naama said, it's certainly a child's this. She doesn't have the maturity. It is about parents. So can you see already there's confusion about what is possibly constituting an adult?
The structural thing we have to analyze, right? Maybe the natural child or adaptive child Maybe natural child will be spontaneous, impulsive feeling, and oriented, self-centric, all those things. So the adaptive child may be compliant. So we need to analyze the structure also further
Yeah.
level.
So Lakshmi, we are not going into that detail. Okay. We are going to understand these ego states.
Okay.
So it's a 1.5 to 2 hour conceptual discussion, right? So the idea is to just understand how these ego states operate, so that it's also available for us as a tool with, in coaching, right? As in terms of using some of this understanding. Okay. Now, this idea of giving this as an example is to, essentially bring home the point that if there is confusion already amongst, us 10 or 15 people here, that, we don't know whether the child is speaking like a parent, whether the child is speaking like an adult, whether the child is speaking like a child, then look at the confusion it creates for the guy who is responding. Now, for someone who said he's responding from a parent state, can I see who's the person responded? Okay, Karthik. Now, let's say you saw that the parent, now let's say you are the parent, you spoke to the child said, why should I clean the room? You're always interfering with my playtime. And your identification is that this is the person speaking from a parent state. So what will your response be?
Depends on the time, probably. It depends on the impulse, what I get. If the child says yes,
just respond, Karthik. Just respond right now.
I'm trying to, because
okay.
Those days are gone.
You want me to help you, Karthik? Karthik, do you want me to be a rebellious child? You want me to help you?
Yes, please.
Because
I have to be a similar kind of a parent, right? Go ahead, Nama.
So Nama, so note this. Now the parent has asked the child has spoken, and Karthik has identified the child speaking from a parent ego state. And so therefore, and I want you to imagine that you have picked up that the child has spoken from a parent ego state. So what is the response of the actual role parent, right? The role is of a parent, different from the ego state. What is the parent what's the parent's response?
If I would have been a parent, the immediate reaction, this is not what I had expected from my child. So I would have definitely gone a step back and started thinking, how am I supposed to handle her or he, the child? Because
so I want you to respond within that transaction. I want someone to respond within that transaction. Shiv, yes, Shiv.
Well, I would just explain to the child that this was not my intention. I'm just trying to explain to you how it should have been. Like, you should clean the room. It will be more beneficial. What are the benefits of what is my intention behind telling the child why they are saying it? I mean, like, why they need to do it now.
Okay.
So let the child understand.
Okay. So we are seeing very evolved parenting here, right? Stepping back, explaining, saying why you should, 3 reasons why. Which is good. Yeah. Okay. Someone else?
Yeah. Maybe I will say, okay, once you finish your play, you can do this.
Right. Okay. So once you finish your play, you can do it. Now, but a parent, the role parent is being spoken to by a person who he perceives also coming like a parent to him. Okay. I am the parent in this family structure. In that family structure, the person who's supposed to be the child is becoming my parent and speaking to me saying, why should I do it? Right? It can be any of these responses, right, Karthik? You can step back and say, oh, this person is, I need to, like Shiv gave a detailed response like an adult and said, okay, maybe I need to become an adult with this parent, right? Or Deepak also used an adult mode, okay, do it after this. But Deepak has still used the parenting thing, do it after this time. Now the question is also, but the primary question also remains whether the child really responded like a parent or a child. The child was probably responding like a child. Not now. Also, the reason is also, Karthik, we have our notions about what a child will say, how a child will speak, right? And anything outside that is either the parent or something else, right, Karthik? I'm just giving that for our own self-reflection. So there are transactions happening internally and there is transaction happening externally. So when you heard the child speak, there was an internal calibration. You know, what she's speaking like a parent to me. Then you said, oh, okay, depending on how I decide, you know, do I like it or not like it? I may decide, okay, I am able to shift from a parent to an adult in that moment. Or I say, how the hell are you speaking to me like this? Right? You have to clean the room, nothing doing. You better finish the room and then, you know, then go out and play. That's also a parent, right? Or a parent sitting him down and saying, look, beta, I understand, you know, that it is getting affected, but you have to do it. There is something, this is important. Is also a parent, right? So there are different parental voices. Similarly, there are different child voices.
When was the last time you heard me say like that?
When was the last time you heard me say like that? Yeah. Or you could ask it in different. When was the last time you heard me say like that?
Right.
And you could say, okay, tell me, this is interesting. When was the last time you heard me say like that? Can come from an adult space also, right? To say, okay, maybe I've done this. Let me understand and then accordingly respond. But the parent, therefore, there are different states that are acting in, you know, underlying in terms of our communication. Okay. And hold on. And therefore, the parent is our taught concept of life, meaning the language of values. This is how things are supposed to be, right? This is how you should be, right? And the value need not only be in a negative association, it could also be from a benevolent parent, a nurturing parent saying, you know, but, you know, it's important that I offer love. So even that reassurance, etc., is the area of a parent. But again, judgments. Why did you do that? Why did you not do that? You should do this. You should not do this. This is how we are supposed to live. All of that is the parent. Where the parent sees, now inherent in the parent ego state is that there is a child below who needs to be taught. Right? Are we getting that? For a parent to exist, there has to be a child. Are we okay? Karthik, I'm seeing confusion in your, because you're the only video and you're the only person with your video on. Okay, so I might keep pointing. Shiv came back.
You're right. Yeah, there's a slight bit of confusion. You got it right.
Yeah.
Why do we still call that as a taught concept of life, meaning parent and adult? It is also something which we imbibe is also a way of thought, right? Yeah, right. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So it is, you know, the idea is that the parent comes, the state comes from a deep, strong notion of what is right and wrong, right?
Correct.
And the value systems that are embedded, and therefore it can be based on things that we have learned, got conditioned, picked up along the way.
Right.
And we see the need to therefore pass it on to the next generation or the next lot. And therefore there is an element of the taught.
Thank you.
But the adult is thought. Adult is logic, rationality. Like Shiv became the adult in this conversation, gave the child 3 reasons why you need to clean the room. What can happen if you don't clean the room? He may even talk about the environment and climate, cleansing, so on and so forth. But there is a rationality involved. There is the element that let's talk as two people who let me not get carried away by my emotion or my assumption. Okay, of what I think you may be experiencing. I don't make any assumptions about how you are behaving with me. I don't take it personally. I respond from logic and rationale. Right? And the child's language is of a language of emotions. And that's why you are seeing a child who, gets excited when they see what they see. They like to do what they think they want to do at that time, right? Or they may learn obedience if there is a parent who teaches obedience. Or if the parent is too strict and does not make the child, and if the child wants to feel free, child may become defiant or complain. So the example that I gave you was a complaining child, right? Why should I clean it? You always disturb me when I'm at play, is the child is putting the complaint. Yes, Namas, tell me.
Now, I need to know that since nurturing parent and an adult non-judgmental is fine, but sometimes even a critical parent is warranted. Is it warranted or not? I would want to know that. If it's warranted, then it's not a complete no-no, right? And the second thing is that can we have a kind of a judgment where we understand that if it's a rebellious child, this kind of, you should be nurturing or you should be just adult. Is there something fixed parameters for a rebellious child or for an adapted child or for a free child?
Nama, I can see you are asking parenting questions. Okay, jokes apart. So anyone, Lakshmi, you want to respond to this? What are your thoughts in terms of, is a critical parent state required, or is that also kind of part of just who we are? Lakshmi?
Yeah.
Is it a complete no, or yes, sometimes even that is permissible, being a critical parent? That's one question.
Lakshmi, quick thoughts.
Yeah. So normally I will be just sharing what is good, what is bad, rather than compelling or rather than making them do it. Yesterday also I have mentioned the same example. Like some good thing is there, I will just tell them, hey, this is what the good thing you have to follow or not follow. It's your responsibility. So I'm not compelling my son who is 6th standard. I will tell him this is good, this is bad, you take a call. That's what my response.
Right. Okay. So, Lakshmi, thanks for that. Shiv has something to say. Yeah. And I see Raghu also. Yeah. Raghu also can come on. Yeah. Shiv, come on.
But if it is a rebellious child, would he understand? Even if you give him the space to explain? Because I am coming from a rebellious state. I want to make sure that I have the power. I want to be heard. So I'm definitely not going to clean the room, even if you explain it to me as a parent. Two different things. Because mine is already conditioned that I need to rebel. I'm full of emotions, right? So is there going to be a space where the child will understand the two choices he's being given, or he's already being conditioned with the rebelliousness within him? So I want to understand what would be the more practical approach on this.
So if it's a rebellious child, what kind of an attitude a parent adopts? This is the second question. The first question, I agree with Raghu that no, a critical parent sometimes is needed when it's needed. It's not a complete no-no.
Right. Yeah. So, so this is the question. Yeah. Karthik, you want to say something? Shainaz, you want to say something?
And to go back to what Lakshmi was mentioning, it is not always right or practical to say that I have this as a parent, I've got to say this, and I leave it to your judgment. As a child, it is not always right to leave things to a child's judgment to decide, especially when he said 6-year-old child. I don't think that's the right position always, right?
Not always, right. Correct, Karthik. I agree.
Yeah, Shainaz?
I'm a non-violent communication facilitator, so I think the nurturing parent is the way to go, because critical, from my understanding, is someone who judges and, you know, like it's not assertive. If it's assertive, yes, but critical is someone who's just judging, who's telling me, oh, you're bad, you're da da da. But nurturing, I still can nurture with assertiveness. This is my way of thinking. So I would tell the child, this is needed to happen because of da 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 da, but you know, but with assertiveness. But I think critical is not recommended in that sense, that I understand critical as being judgmental and, you know, all about like moralistic judgmentals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lovely. I just love one sentence, one marker that you said, that you can be nurturing parent with a little authority, with a little seriousness, you know, with a little, yeah, seriousness. So that was lovely. Yeah, you can be a balance. You can, fantastic. Yeah.
Great, wonderful, Nama. You got that answer. Venkat, you wanted to say something?
You know, it depends on age group as well as, like, you know, how they are, you know, understanding, right? There is no right answer, like, you know, again, situation to situation. Even though my kid was there, I'm preaching them, yeah, it is up to your choice. And they are not understanding. However, we need to make them correct. You know, indeed, I will give you examples. My parents taught me, these are all the core values. These are all the things I'm following it up. Why don't you look at that way? That is the way we have to, you know, approach them, or rather teach them. It doesn't mean like, you know, simply we are giving it to them and, you know, they will take the right decision. No, that is what my opinion is.
Okay. Deepak?
Yes, I just have one thought over this, that maybe as a parent, I would also like to understand what is really hurting me. Is it my ego that I'm not getting that respect from my child, which is getting hurt, right? That is one aspect. And second is that when any child is being rebellious, he's not being rebellious for that particular incident or situation or statement. There is something already missing, which we may have to think through. That what caused him to react like this? Maybe there had been certain previous incidents which triggered these kind of emotions or reactions.
Right. Okay. So, you know, it's fantastic. I think Deepak, you've spoken, right? Okay, that a hand is up. Okay. So one of the things is that when we talk about the parent-child, adult-child, right? One is also this ego state. When we look at these, they are not just operating in our relationships with our own children. Okay, of course, significantly they are operating there. We'll see them very obviously. The idea is also to observe how we behave with others around us. Okay, the ego states that come in. For example, even when you're sitting with your friends, what is the ego state that comes in? Assumption, you know, you may think that, okay, I'm sitting with my friends, so therefore I'm doing an adult to adult conversation. Not necessary. Okay. Or that I am sitting with my my father, though I have grown up, so I might have a child state. We are talking about ego states, not necessarily related to the role. Are we getting what I'm saying? So the idea is that this can be something that we can use in different relationships as to kind of check in on what is it that comes up for us in the way we behave. So Nama, you have got that answer, right? The idea is that we are looking at the communication element, Nama, right? So the communication element is about, if it's about judgment, morality, getting critical, the messaging will get lost. What will get picked up is the judgment, the morality, the stubbornness that the parent is coming, right? So if you take the content of the values, the, you know, what we want to talk about, right? And we are able to juxtapose that with a nurturing parent, maybe you still manage to, you know, and that's, you know, you still manage to get more creative about what we want to teach the child. Right?
Can I just add something out here?
Yeah.
Because it's not taking too long.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I've noticed situations where when you are nurturing and you're trying your best to, to keep your sanity, and you're trying to explain your child something, but the child takes advantage because you are being very, very soft. You're trying ways and means to make it not this way, that way, and the child is actually understanding, and it takes advantage of your nurturing aspect.
Yeah.
So that is the time you don't know what you really have to do, how you handle that child, because it's just going on and on.
Yeah.
And the child knows that the parent is not going to be strict with me, is not going to raise his voice, is not going to raise a hand. Of course not, that's out of question, but be aggressive to me, with me, be, really. So he's taking advantage. It just goes on and on. So that situation is compelling. You don't know how to handle the child because the child is used to you being very meek and nurturing and very submissive. The child is just throwing his weight around.
So so Naama, just a small thought, because is that I noticed how you put all those three words together. Okay, meek, submissive, and nurturing. Okay, and in that is probably an area to examine how we see the nurturing parent as, and I'm just leaving that as a thought, Naama, because it's not that I liked what also this Shahnaz said, right? Shahinaz said that even in nurturing there is assertiveness, there is choice, there can be a toughness that can come in, and yet I completely at the same time, Naama, pick up what you're saying, right? That as parents, that's why I started by saying that all of these states exist in us, right, Naama? So there will be the critical parent depending on our conditioning, our behaviors, our emotional unprocessed stuff, which is going to come up, which is a reality. The idea of, a model like this is for us to kind of examine and see where it becomes, if it becomes patterns, if it becomes regular, if the models become so embedded that then they become a part of how we function and operate regularly in the relationship. That's the element for us. If we are doing it, from a state of choice that I need to be tough at this moment, at this point with this person, and, really kind of help create boundaries for the child from which the child can, pick up the right lessons, then you are still exercising an adult choice without going from, you see, at the end, it is also about what is it that leads us to that behavior, which is why we're saying parent is our taught concept, that if I don't do it, if I don't teach him now, he will take advantage of me, or he'll become a bad child, he'll grow up to be a bad child. All of these are all embedded beliefs, Naama. And that puts the pressure. That colors our vision of what is happening here and now. And therefore, sometimes then we end up with these binary ideas of parenting that, I'm being nice, but, in the process, am I being meek and, too accepting, too giving? Because if I don't do that, then there's the other side, which is really tough, which is strict, which is punitive, which is, tends to become very harsh. The idea is therefore to examine these. And I would, my recommendation would be, just use one of your buddy coaching to even examine these three polarities that we have created in our mind. Does that make sense, Naama?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Deepak, did you have something to say, or can we move on? I thought I saw
yes.
You raise your hand.
Just one viewpoint on this. I think one word which I heard is that parents might think that child is taking advantage, right? Now, advantage word itself is coming from adult ego state, right? Which child even may not be aware. So then who I am being at that moment as a parent, when I'm thinking that someone is taking my advantage, all my actions, thoughts will get combined, and maybe I will react in that particular way.
Yeah. It may be, yes, absolutely. So there's an assumption being made. The only difference is it coming from an adult ego state, or is it coming from a state of, because if I was from a, you know, from a taught kind of a space that, you know, usually like this, you know, this can happen, I may be getting taken advantage of. And even in that mode, the parent may be becoming a child. Oh my God, I will feel helpless if this child takes advantage of me. The ego state may be of a child, right? I don't want them to take advantage of me and make me feel helpless. Let me impose my role of a parent right now and tell them who's what in this relationship, right? But it's coming from the space of the hurt child who felt that I needed to be respected and I'm not respected. My space is not being protected. That nama is what we're talking from an ego state point of view, right? Are we getting clearer that the ego state is something that's happening inside us? Okay. So, yes. So as we grow up, the parent state is about, we take on ideas, beliefs, feelings, behaviors from our parents. And it is called, you know, our caretakers. The parent may be even whoever was taking care of us, right? Whoever spent a lot of time, whom we got influenced by. Okay, then that's in the TA world is called introjecting. And the parent ego state is rooted in the past. Essentially, TA defines two types of parents, the nurturing parent and the controlling or the critical nama. So there is the controlling element. And all of us, let's also remember, this is not just in the way we relate to our children. This can happen in the way we relate to our spouses, to our boyfriends, to our girlfriends, to our friends, to the subordinates, to the larger community environment. You know, even the nurturing parent namas can seem like very nice, but you know, have you seen these people who will, as soon as they're in the group, they will get in, you know, they'll say, "Main kar lungi, I will bring food, I will bring this, I will do this. Do you have a problem? Let me come and do it for you." Right? I will come early and open the door of the office. Don't worry. I will sit back late. I will take care of you is the implicit message. There is a nurturing parent there also. So now you can ask the question, what is the need here for that person to be a nurturing parent, right? And take over. What is the need that is being fulfilled? So there is nothing within that. One need not kind of associate a positive value to one or the other, or a negative value to one or the other. The idea is to really examine, you know, because beyond the semantics, beyond the words is the question of why we're doing what we're doing, right? And what is it telling us about how we're managing these transactions? The child ego state is also in the past. It is about thoughts, feelings that we have experienced as a child. There are three types of a child: the natural, the little professor, the adaptive child. But like I said, we're not going to go deep into examining each of these. But it is this, you know, it is about, you know, the reason we're saying is, how did the child experience the parents, the caretakers? And sometimes, you know, and I remember the question that I think Deepak or Raghu asked in the neuroscience session, that if the impulse control is not, has not been, you know, is not being managed, it's also useful to see that the child state, right? That there is, what is it that, you know, remains so unfulfilled that the child needs feels a need to remain this natural child, always in full, complete spontaneity without wanting to make conscious choices. Right? Raghu, was that your question? Or Lakshmi? I don't remember.
That's correct. It was me who asked.
Lakshmi, yeah. So Lakshmi, it could also be that. I'm so sorry. Who is...
No issues. No issues.
Okay, because I saw Lakshmi's mic open right now. So
no. I asked that the structure of child, natural child, adaptive.
Okay. Yeah. So Raghu, so it could also be the natural child, impulsive, spontaneous, playful, right? Now, so there is a positive to it, but it could also be that the child does not want to grow because, you know, there was a lot of suppression or repression of what one wanted as a younger child.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah,
then
an
now,
adaptive child is compliant, conforms
adaptive
to
child
the...
will be compliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Adaptive child can, depending on, okay, also, you know, from a spectrum where the child is, also about, you know, how adaptive, right? How obedient, that you're not able to kind of consciously choose. Yeah. Yes, Mridu?
Ma'am, so do these states also exist in workspaces where the boss is very judgmental at times or very nurturing at times, and the subordinate, eventually everyone is shifting from these states even in the workspaces? Does that exist?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Very much, very much.
Every transaction of life, right? So
Okay.
the boss calls the person into the cabin, and the person, you know, has already got some work that is already there. And the boss says, you know what, I want you to do this and complete this today before you go. And let's say the employee already has, you know, stuff on the table, stuff to do, but, you know, just says, yes, sir. Okay, sir, and walks out. It's still a parent-child relationship that is operating there. Now, the question, Mridu, can be maybe, okay, and this is where we read, maybe the boss did not come from a parent state. The boss said, you know what, this needs to be done. Maybe he was speaking as an adult, okay, but the child, you know, maybe there may be an orientation of the person to operate like a child. Now, the transaction quality can be changed, right, from awareness with support. But it could be that the employee just goes in and says, yes, sir, and walks out and does not share the problem of not being able to complete the work, or that I already have something else. So the adaptive child may wait back and sit for another couple of hours and complete the work. Okay. Or say, yes, sir, and then go out and throw the file on the table and say, what the hell? Right? Can you see the, right? And say, main karunga nahi. Let me see. You know, so, but there's confusion. Doesn't know whether he's supposed to do it or tomorrow face the music, right? So all these are things that we are familiar with, right? And then, and the little professor who is the, which is like the imaginative, thoughtful, creative, yeah, the one who spontaneously also kind of, you know, let me be curious, let me see what else is possible here. And that little professor, the child, like we say, right? The child in you, bring out the child in you when you're learning something new, right? And that is really about, you know, both the natural child, the little professor, all of them really operating and, you know, staying curious and, you know, being creative, right? And therefore, hold on. Oops. So again, it's some issue happening. So. Okay, so why did it go all the way back? Okay, so, and then let's look at the adult ego state. The adult ego state is the grown-up, the rational person talking reasonably, assertively, dealing with the here and now. You know, I may have had a bad experience with this person, but let me see what he brings to the table right now is an ability of us to be in the present that we talk about. And therefore saying, okay, let me see what he has to talk right now. Let me see if we can, kind of handle this, because I feel I'm in control of my, what I want to create for myself. So I will, kind of take responsibility for my actions. I will make a conscious choice depending on, whether it makes sense or not. And that is the adult ego state. And all of us have experienced that adult ego state in ourselves, just as we've all experienced the parent ego state in ourselves and the child ego state in ourselves, right? So, so it comes from a space of not making assumptions and dealing with the here and the now. And here, therefore, the adult ego state, if you go back to our neuroscience class, is using not just, you know, there is not just the emotional brain, but using the prefrontal and the frontal to process information and be able to, you know, kind of rationally send signals back to the amygdala that it's okay. We can handle this. I'm going to make certain choices which will help us handle this. Are we okay on this? So the adult will ask for information rather than staying scared or making assumptions. Please stop me.
Sorry, can you, your mic is down. Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. So I was just saying the adult will ask for information rather than being scared or making assumptions. Right? Now, the structural model, you know, of TA that, you know, for Lakshmi also spoke of structure. In the model now, the adult typically is placed in between the parent and the ego states to show how it has to, you know, in a sense, orchestrate between the parent and the child. If the parent criticizes the child, you're no good, look at what you did, you're so useless. And the child thinks, oh, I'm no good. Look how useless I am. I'm never doing anything right. And if this is the inner dialogue going in the child, then the adult is the state that can intervene and say that this kind of parenting is not useful. And that adult may intervene within the parent who said you're useless. See that the child is, you know, going into the shell. And the adult comes in and says, this is not the right style. I know better styles and I can, you know, I need to do something that is going to make a difference. And I know, and this cannot be helpful. So maybe the adult can, you know, kind of help the parent, you know, tell the parent and help the parent, you know, kind of push down their own negative dialogue about their child and become a nurturing parent. Or the child who has got the rebuke, the adult can kick in, the adult state can kick in and say, okay, I need to stop this. Just because one person is saying this does not mean that I am like this. I know I can be better. And take on a more positive kind of state. But of course, in younger children, and that's what makes it tricky, that in younger children may not have all the faculties to process that, right? And that's why, you know, but it starts developing as they go on, as they become better, as they become older, and the frontal cortex starts developing, experiences start growing, their own ability to make choices start improving. Is that okay?
Yes.
Clues for the ego vocabulary. Some cues are here in terms of, you know, words that are typically used by the critical parent: should, must, don't, good, bad, or finger pointing, arms crossed, harsh language, rolling of the eyes, furrowed brow, etc., scowling. Or for the nurturing parent is more soothing, don't worry, let me help you there. Pat on the arm, smiling. Yeah, everything that we associate with nurturing, empathy, compassion, love is there. But the nurturing parent does not mean that therefore you become, you know, you become submissive. Because if you become submissive, then you're becoming a child in that situation. Right? If it is about seeing that, yeah, this is what I, as a parent, I'm in a position to offer this love, to make a difference to that child, because I value parenting. I value a child, you know, creating love and compassion for my child. An adult is how the rational, asking questions, open, thoughtful, eye-level contact, being able to be still and being able to be present. And the, in child, we're looking at a free child. In free child, we're of course looking at the professor and the, we spoke about the natural child. The I wish, wow, love, hate, there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of exaggeration of, oh, that's so great. The whole body is, kind of, completely, feeling animated. And the adapted child learns to say sorry, please, thank you, rules, protocols, and, complaining. You're always like this, monotonous stuff. And, or looking at this sometimes, if you're looking at this, you're looking, wow, looking like, so there is that sense of, being carried away by whatever is happening with the person ahead. Pouting, disengaged, downcast, not feeling in control. The child not feeling in control can show up. And therefore, an adapted child who says, and we'll come to this, that, maybe I don't know, but the world knows, right? And that's where the I'm okay, I'm not okay, they are okay kind of thing can come up. Okay. So some examples of conversations, we know that let me help you with your luggage, a nurturing parent, right? Look at this. And the child says, oh, thank you very much. The free child. Critical parent, I checked your document for our meeting. It is full of spelling mistakes. You should have run the spell check. Oh, I'm sorry. It won't happen again. The adaptive child. Right? So these are the ego states. Now look at this. Critical parent, critical parent. Absolutely typical. Critical parent is saying, yes, they always manage to run late and they never give any warning. Two critical parents discussing about something, right? So idea is for us to be aware of what are the ego states that are impacting our communication. So it shows us, so this is the PAC, this is also called the PAC model. So how are you finding this model? A quick check before we move in the next half an hour. How are you, what is this model helping you understand? What, any insights, particular insights that are coming in? You can even put it on chat. Any insights? Yes. Anyone just start off? Just a quick one. Want to get a sense of, is this making, are you liking it? Yeah.
In coaching, it needs to be adult to adult conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Because the premise is that the client has their resources. Okay, any other insights? So when we start advising, etc., just step back and see, is it coming from a parenting mode that maybe he doesn't know, maybe he won't know, and that's why I need to advise, right, Karthik?
Yes.
So it can come up, or if we have not worked sufficiently on ourselves, and the client takes over the conversation. You remember this? Anita and I did a mentoring session where we spoke about coach challenges. And if the client is talking so much, and if we are not worked sufficiently on ourselves, and the coach says, oh my God, how do I deal with this guy? Yeah, he's too good. He already seems to know so much. Probably a child state coming in, right? So observing what is the ego state, what is that telling us? What's the belief it's coming from? And be able to make the shift wherever it's possible. If you see it as a consistent pattern, then working with, a coach, working with, doing a self-coaching, whatever, and seeing where are these patterns coming up. And it often comes up even in spousal relationships, right? Very, very observant in spousal relationships. Sometimes a parent-child mode can come up. It is, a wife may say, okay, I have to be the adaptive child, or the husband may become, an adaptive child, though we think in our norms and structures, it's the wife who's expected, but within the four walls of the home, anyone can take on the parent or the child relationship, right? So observing, becoming aware of these ego states. Everybody has the capacity to think, and people decide their own destiny. So these decisions can be changed, and that's the whole premise of TA. Okay, so let's move
So
on.
eventually what we are saying is it's then the PAC actually represents the thought and felt concept,
That's
which
right.
we discussed earlier.
Right.
Same.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So now we're also talking about strokes. Okay, there's something called strokes. That's another concept. And the strokes are, when there is transaction of communication happening. And Karthik, you said, so essentially it means this. And I said, yes, absolutely, Karthik. Right. And there within that, there is a particular stroke that I'm giving you that says, hey, that's great. You seem to have understood it. Right. So they can be verbal, non-verbal, positive, negative. It's again a unit of attention, of action. And strokes kind of help the coach, when you're attentive, you observe what motivates the client. What are the needs? What is the area where the client needs assistance, and you offer strokes there. Now, if a child has grown up in an environment where there are not enough positive strokes, right? And this is especially important when we look at parenting, then the child may say, let me at least do something where the parent will notice and give me one slap, or, shout at me or criticize me, because then at least there is a negative stroke, and there is some stroke of some kind. There's some attention of some kind, right? So the fundamental need of a human being is to connect, to feel connected, to feel that, there is some, and that connection is happening when someone looks at you and says, okay, I know you're here. I know you're present. And strokes is about that. In any communication, in any relationship, there is that need of every human being for that, right? Now, and as a child, therefore, to be aware that, when we say, this child is always being, or someone wrote, why is a rebellious child being rebellious? Is that child used to a certain kind of attention, a certain kind of stroke that says, okay, this is the way I get my attention, right? Or this is the way I go and, kind of get the parent to speak to me when they are so busy with their work the whole day, right? So, similarly, it can happen even as adults. We can do some of these little things. So watching, but more importantly as coaches, for us to see how do we kind of, create memories. And because these stroke experiences are stored in the memories. When we talked about memory in the previous class, it's often these strokes are what are creating the emotional associations related to persons, related to events, related to interactions, related to time, related to the outcome, related to our capacity to produce, related to, accidents, everything. Okay. So, and there may be some preferred strokes. Okay. And so, for example, a person who is reluctant to forgive will prefer to retain memory of the anger strokes for a long time because they are reluctant to forgive, right? So they'll remember, ask them, and they'll say, oh, all my life, all these people, everyone, these, and they will be facts. This one did this, this one did this, this one did this, because they are now become a preferred kind of a stroke. Right. And the next time they also see something, they are talking, those are the communications they'll pick up really fast. Right. A person who does not like the job that they're working will retain that tiredness, the memory of the tiredness, and it will reinforce a belief that's already existing that work is so boring and tiring. Right. So, so that is why we need to understand this idea of strokes. And so the stroke economy is what? So it kind of tells you about, when we tend to too economical, right? That, for example, don't give strokes to others even when you have them to give. Don't praise them or they will want more. Aren't we familiar with these? Or don't ask for strokes when you need them or want them, because if you ask them, they will know I want them, or they don't, they will think that, or if I have to ask them, which means uska koi matlab nahi hai, it doesn't count for much, or they will know that I like, for me, their validation is important. Don't accept positive strokes. Don't accept positive strokes even if you want them. Just give me a second. Is it okay? Give me a 30-second. There's someone. Extremely sorry. Yeah. Or don't reject negative strokes when they come your way, because if they say so, it must be true, right? Can you see some of these seem familiar in ourselves or in others, right? Don't brag, don't think too much, you will get a big head. Or don't laugh so much because you have done this work to, in the night you will cry. Have you heard these? These are all very familiar. In, if you're, especially if you lived in a large family, you will see some of these, statements being made, which means that you, in some societies, some cultures promote a stroke economy, right? And therefore, therefore, what is the conditioning that we give? So be attentive, provide them as much as is required, because that feeling of, unconditional positive regard can always be helpful for your clients. Okay.
So in this strokes and the life position, like I am not okay, you are not okay, so we will avoid them, right? And I am okay, you are not okay. So it's a kind of an aggression. Is this are we comparing, or how it is with strokes and life positions?
One would impact the other, right? Because if strokes are the memories, then the life position is the script, in a sense, the big meta script that we have written, right? It could be a small one, or it could be a, a meta script that we have written, that I'm okay, you're not okay, etc. That if there are a lot of negative strokes and there is no space, the memories are of negative strokes, then, in a sense, you're building the, a position that, okay, maybe I don't know anything, maybe I'm not okay, but everyone else outside seems to know so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Can someone please request? Hello, this is some sound coming. Okay. Okay. So,
so ma'am, are strokes behavior assumptions? I'm quite unable to understand it exactly.
It's like this. Okay. So look at this example. Okay. Ritu, just look at this. Positive conditional for doing things right. Well done is a stroke. Mridu, let's say you ask me a question. I say, Mridu, what a great question. It's a compliment. It's an acknowledgement. That's a stroke. Right? So it is the acknowledgement of what you're doing or being or showing up as. And therefore, that can be either positive or negative. In that, I have created some record that you are going to store away, either about me or about people. So anything that you do by way of acknowledging is a stroke.
And there's a repetitiveness to it. There's a pattern to it.
If it gets repeated, that's a pattern, right? A parent may repeatedly give positive strokes. But if it may not be repetitive, a single unit is called a stroke. You and I may not speak at all during the rest of the session, but I may give you one positive stroke, you may give me one positive stroke. It is still a stroke.
So can we say, ma'am, that any kind of response can be said to be a stroke?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any kind of response can be a stroke, yes, but it is in response to, so the response can also be that I can say it's raining today, it's so it's so difficult, yeah, these rains are so bad, and you may say yes, I agree. So it's still a response, but it's not necessarily a stroke. I mean, you can stretch it and say, yeah, I feel good that this person is agreeing with me. So there is a positiveness in that stroke. Nama,
yeah,
right?
Right, ma'am.
But
Absolutely.
look for but it's also about anything that shows the regard you have for me, which can be positive or negative.
Yeah, it immediately connects you because it's an agreement.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So there is an element of positivity, of a stroke
Right.
there. And if let's say you were to talk and I don't listen, I turn my head away, then there's a negative stroke there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
so we have to. Yeah, sorry. So we have to make a conscious effort to give a stroke to other people and accept strokes positively from other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you can see in this box here, there are 4 different kinds of strokes that have been outlined here, which is that positive conditional for doing things right. Well done. I'm reading it out because I'm not sure if it's big enough for you to read. Positive unconditional, no strings or condition attached. Oh, I just love you, right? So that's an unconditional stroke. Negative conditional for doing wrong. You look silly. Okay. Negative unconditional. I hate you. Negative attention. No reason apparently given. I hate you. Right? Now, if you look on this side, on the left-hand side, it is for something that the person has done. Right? And here's for something that the person is being. Okay? Any questions? Now, question therefore is, can you give negative strokes, right? And the point is, one is that will you be, my question is, will you really be able to avoid it? If there's something that has gone wrong, the person has done something, incorrect, then you would give them a negative stroke, right? You would say this is not right. This can be done better. This, is incorrect. So there is the possibility of a negative stroke.
But what you are saying is kind of a constructive stroke. Only the negative aspect of is there. Then you started as a constructive one.
Yeah,
so,
but that's the whole idea, right? So
follow a nurturing parent and give the stroke.
Yeah. Right. So now whether unconditional, by if someone says negative, for example, negative unconditional stroke, right? That, oh, I just hate you, right? Or I don't like having you here, right? Now, if someone says, look, if a client comes and says, I really don't know what I've done to this person or anything, but he keeps giving, he just seems to react or respond, it's possible for us to dig deeper and say, what possibly, what do you think may be causing this, right? And you can help the client go into and check in on terms of, is there something you did? Is there something some vibe? Is there something you don't like about that person, which may, which that person may be picking up? So it's possible for you to kind of create a conversation there, rather than, and in a relationship, it can happen. Let's say the husband or the wife is telling the husband that I just hate you, right? It can mean that the husband has some takeaway from there, that there's something that I'm doing or being that is possibly creating a strong emotion in that other person, right? So there is a possibility for me to go back and reflect and see what's happening there. So, but for that one will need to, but if they say, I hate you, I also hate you, in a sense, then that conversation and that communication is not going to, if you stay that the path and, check in on what possibly is creating these strong negative emotions in both of them, then there's possibility of going from that state, right, of a child who both of them in a child state saying, I hate you and I hate you, to saying, okay, I mean, this seems to be happening. Maybe we need the help of an adult somewhere, maybe, go find a therapist, or, kind of say, okay, let us just step back and see, maybe talk to each other later when we both are in a position to talk like adults. But it has its benefit of us knowing that something may be going wrong in that relationship. Okay. So
we can give strokes to ourselves also when we deserve or when we need.
Very important for us to give strokes to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Very important, right? When you get up and go up to the mirror and say, you're looking fantastic today. You are absolutely looking the best you've ever looked, and this is the best day for you today. You're going to kick ass today, right? Things like that. It's a stroke that for yourself.
Yeah, that is very important.
You're being your own friend.
Exactly.
Right? You're going before an important meeting, a critical stakeholder meeting. Breathing yourself and says, hey, you've done so many great things. You have met customers like this. You've done things like this. I want you to remember it. Pat yourself on the back.
We have to think about the whatever past went well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So now, so it's, you can see how both of these models of understanding which more, when a client comes and says, I'm having this problem in the relationship and not able to do this, what is the state that they are in? What is the state that they are coming from? And what is causing that state may be a good area for us to work with, right? And are they taking responsibility? Are they feeling okay about themselves? Are they giving themselves choices? Are they feeling empowered? Are they self-dependent? Are they getting sufficient strokes from the environment? Right? Are they getting a lot of negative strokes? When you do a 360-degree feedback with an organization, essentially they're getting strokes, right? And if they're getting, and you can also kind of, so therefore also seeing, if there seems to be some kind of positive or negative, being able to help that, kind of getting a sense of what's happening and, supporting your client in coming to a state where they kind of are okay to kind of look at information and data and say, okay, how do I want to work with this? But from a state where they are able to feel okay to receive, right? If they're feeling seriously depressed or angry, that's a time for you to help them, just dissociate from that strong negative emotion. Because they're coming from either a rebellious child or a critical parent state, to help them kind of settle down and, feel okay about themselves. That's also our job. But, so all of these terminologies help us to kind of sense, right? Are we okay on that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now the challenge happens once when, if the transactions are not complementary. So if a parent talks, right, and the kids, are they lazy these days? The parent is talking and the parent is also saying, yeah, they're all on drugs, right? So it's a complementary transaction, right? Adult to adult is also complementary. Child to child, I like you, I also like you, complementary. Parent to child, where is that report? I'm sorry, it's not finished. While the child may be, scared, but it's still a parent-child communication, right? So there's a complementary communication. And therefore it works well. The parent will say, you have not done it, now do it by tomorrow 9 o'clock. Yes, sir. You keep the phone down. It's been a complementary transaction. Right? adult to child, I think you need to go and wash your dirty face. Okay, I think so. It makes sense. Or it's lovely weather for time of this year, adult to adult. Again, complementary. Now, what happens when there is a cross transaction? Adult is saying, how are you feeling now? And the child says, what do I care? What do you care about how I'm feeling? So then the adult has tried to speak, but the child speaks. Is the conversation going to go well? What do you care? Now the adult may say, oh, okay. Now adult will have to make more effort for this child to either come to a spontaneous child space or to an adult space before they can have a fruitful conversation. Right? Now, ulterior transaction. I need you to stay late at the office with me. And the person says, of course. So there may be an ulterior, there may be a message and there may be a psychological message. What is the person picking up? Is the person picking up, oh, why does this boss want me to stay back? So is there a message? I am afraid. Or that, oh, you know, I am the only person who's always asked to stay late. Another ulterior message. So there can be one thing that is said and there's something else that can be picked up. Okay.
What is the definition of psychological message?
The message that is being, that is going down. You know, there is a social message, Shiv, which is, I need you to stay late, right? And the psychological message is what may get picked up. So, sorry, just hold on. What may get picked up by the person internally. So the social is happening externally, the psychological is happening internally.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let's
It is though the outset he says, of course,
yeah,
there could be a lot of other things which will be running between them.
Correct.
Right. So
absolutely. That is the one. Right. Crossed message, therefore. So, you know, again, familiar, where adult is talking to adult, the child responds or the parent may respond. The adult may say, you know what, I think we can do all of this work tomorrow since it's getting late. And the parent says, we should be completing tasks before we go home. I think you should be completing tasks before you go home. Can be a parent speaking, right? And so therefore there can be a cross messaging that can happen. And that can create some kind of inconsistency, communication, you know, different ego states can become therefore challenging, right? Again, familiar situations. So can create conflicts. So I don't know why this is happening. I'm so sorry. Okay. Now I want us to come to transference and counter transference. Okay. So, okay. Now the quick thing before that is to say that when there is a cross happening, if we are mindful, let's say, you know, and some people, you know, when they're very good, and all of us at some different points manage to do it, an adult sees, okay, this person likes to be a parent, right? And the adult also then tends to respond as a child in the sense, wow, yes, of course, what a great, you know, you are saying, what you're saying is right. I think we should do this, appeasing the parent. And, you know, therefore, in a sense, also managing that relationship. Have you seen that? Now, therefore, that adult is not doing it necessarily out of no choice, but saying that, okay, it's a good stroke to offer this parent. Right? And then also then seeing how to bring them to a adult state. Because you appease the parent is not feeling unsafe, that someone is going to question my authority. And then saying, okay, now what next do you think we should do? And then that person talks and says, yes, that's a great idea. I also think. Now the parent ego state is satisfied, will be also probably willing to listen to what the other person has to say, right? So some of these things we learn along the way, right? So when there is more complementary transactions, there is possibility of lesser conflicts happening. But first satisfy that ego state that's required and then bring them into the state that will probably work in the longer run. Okay. So then we want to talk. Okay. Any questions so far? We are at 13:05. So I want to kind of take the next 10 to 15 minutes for us to close. But are we okay, all of us, to spend another 10-15 minutes?
And can I have the previous slide, please, for a minute, sure. For a second? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's look at, therefore, I'm going to take some of the critical. This is crazy. This is just moving. Okay. Now there's something called transference and countertransference. Okay. Now, okay. Now, okay. Now, when there is transference, you may be reminded of someone in the behavior of others or where previous memories are triggered. For example, it could be that I have a colleague and I feel that, you know, I have the same emotion for that colleague like I have for a sibling. And I say, you know, so there is a certain transference of emotions. Or I, you know, I have a mother who I don't get along with. And the next time I see an older woman who talks, who looks like, you know, who may probably there's something that triggers in what she speaks. And I have the same emotions that I have, which I feel for my mother. That is transference. Counter-transference is that for us to be aware, let's say now as a coach, and I want to give an example of this. I had a client, we've completed the coaching relationship now. The client who, you know, I think the second or third session, after the second or third session, posted the photographs of her mother and her. Okay. And this was a client who was older than me. So the reason I'm saying that is age need not be the criteria. And, you know, she had been, you know, she had settled in, there was great rapport. And then she's, you know, she's posted the photographs and she said, I don't remember the exact something she found familiar. I think, you know, was it a birth date or something? And she said, you know, there's so many things about you that remind me of my mother, and that's why I'm posting these photographs. Okay. And so there was that, you know, what's happening, there is a transference, right? There is a likelihood that not only is she posting the photographs, but she may also start feeling, okay, this is and the mother had passed away in this case. So expecting that therefore that there is a substitute figure, a mother figure, right? Now, what can be a counter transference that can happen? That as a coach, I may feel, oh yeah, she feels like I'm her mother. So, you know, I take extra time, I spend extra time. I don't challenge the client for fear of losing that respect. Wow, she's treated me like her mother. So, you know, I have to be very careful now with her. Let me not do things that may, you know, make her feel out of, you know, I don't want to break that. This is such a beautiful connection, right? Or I may think, okay, now she thinks as mother, I may start, you know, I may start giving some advice to the client. And the client is also, because she's transferred those same feelings, may also start saying, yeah, maybe. Can you see what's happening in that relationship? So that is transference and counter-transference. Important for us to remember and start noticing these things, okay, and become aware. When the client starts projecting some of these, you know, these feelings about something, someone, And it can often happen, okay, where they can say, yeah, you know, this is like my family, some family members, usually some parents, some grandparents, some, you know, older brother, older sibling, can happen. Okay, so watch out for those. Okay, what else can we just go down to? Are we okay? I'm moving ahead. Let me stop me if you need anything. I don't know now why the strokes. Okay. Okay, now let's understand games. Okay, now transaction analysis says that we are playing games in our relationships. That's another element to look out for. I can see Karthik smile, right? So in social settings, there are games that we play. And those games are again games that we play in order for us to, you know, to have with an ulterior motive that we may have. They can get repetitive, but we play them because there is a benefit that we get out of it. Some psychological benefit. Okay. And some names, in fact, here you'll find some names. If you check out, there'll be a lot of other names that are there out there that you'll find. Okay. One of the game is typically that in a relationship, sometimes you always look, you know, that you can play a victim, someone will play a rescuer. Oh, I have a problem. Will you do this? Hey, Karthik, you know what? Just this little, yeah. Can you just finish this work off for me? You know, I have to, you know how it is. Yeah. I have so much to do. Yeah. You know, and Karthik says, yeah. Okay, let me do this. Right. So that becomes it becomes a kind of, and I may go back and do it with someone else. I may do it with Lakshmi. I may do it with Nama, because I see, yeah, playing that victim becomes a game that I can easily play. Right? Or, you know, you say, okay, I look out for, oh, there's something that this person needs that I can find. So I can be you know, kind of be the rescuer. It could also play that way. Right? Or you can see this in terms of response. You know, the game is always, you know, someone says, you know what, I could not do this. And the person may just be talking, oh, but did you try this? Did you try this? Did you try this? Did you try this? I need that. I have a strong need to constantly respond and give you a response. Another kind of game. Right? Or it could be, you know, something called a payoff, which is, I know I am no good at helping. This person on the left is saying, which is a victim, and the persecutor always saying, I knew she couldn't help me. So you will have people who will come and ask you for help. You will sometimes even meet clients who will come in. But they come in, and therefore in the discovery session, it's often necessary to recognize them. They'll say, you know, they're never sure anyone's going to be able to help them. Right? But it's also a validation they do. In a familiar relationship, it can actually be a victim who goes back and says, oh God, I'm not able to help him. And the spouse may constantly, you know, be creating problems in their life. There may be a pattern, and the victim takes on that role that, oh my God, I have to help out. And the other person thinking this person has to help me out, but is incapable of doing so. Okay. People who are, you know, constantly become debtors, people who constantly feel cornered, people who constantly, you know, kind of go out and try and fight with everyone. All of these are games that we are playing. Right? People who like to always help. Right? And you can also be, you know, they're all playing certain games, and there are certain patterns in the relationship. Right? If you look at the kind of a cross, right? Both of us turn our heads away. Because always there is this thing that nothing really works, so both look away. And if you see, if their pattern in many of their relationships, it will be like this. No one understands the other. Okay, so games are essentially there is an ulterior motive there. What is possibly the ulterior motive of the payoff game, for example? What is the ulterior motive of, for example, where one plays a victim and another plays the rescuer? What is the psychological motive?
To provide help.
That is okay, Shiv. So you have provided help. The victim came and, they say, oh, I need help. The rescuer provided. Okay. That's a social transaction. That's a social transaction. What is the psychological benefit?
To get attention, maybe.
Maybe to get attention, yes. Also, Anupama, how about validating your own psychological belief?
Right.
I don't know anything. I need help. I'm always dependent. Maybe the victim's psychology. So it's validating their embedded belief. And the rescuer feels that, yes, you know what? Every time I'm helping, I feel that I am good for something. People need me. I'm so important. I'm not dispensable. Right? And if it is happening in the same relationship, then they are playing roles, each one satisfied to play that. There's a psychological belief that no one is going to upset that apple cart. Tumhara role karoge, you will make me feel happy. I'll play my role. I'll feel happy. Both of us are keeping that semblance of a good relationship going. Right? Because no one wants to break from that safety and comfort. Right? So there is the benefits these are therefore the games that we play in relationships, and becoming aware of those games. Right? So and sometimes it's the client who may be playing that the game within their relationships. They may be playing that sometimes even within the client, within the coaching conversation. Call out and ask them. Right? So there is like Eric Berne says, when our scripts, no one questions our script, we are all in the same position, we are happy. You avoid conflict. Okay. And have you seen in parties, people, kiss, they air kiss. Right? So the air kiss, it keeps a certain social structure in place. Right? People who may be fighting in their joint relationships, but they enter into that big hall, they'll go and, touch the leg of the grandparent whom they have been cursing. What is that game you're playing? You're playing it because there is a social advantage. They also say, how respectful this person is. So there is a socializing framework that does not get disturbed. Right? So in coaching, bringing awareness to these games can be useful. When in relationships, okay, what do you normally do? What do you regularly do? How do you respond? What is the benefit of doing the same thing again and again? Like when a client feels stuck and says, nothing is moving. Every time I talk to him, this is what he does. What is the benefit that you have of continuing to speak in the same way? How else would you want it to be, right? Sometimes the client doesn't also want to move. Are we okay on this? Yeah. Now this life positions is something that I've just added for us. It's not part of, I don't know whether I don't think you'll find it in your script, but in your guide. But when this is something that Lakshmi referred to, right?
Yes.
One of the components of transaction analysis is also when we look at strokes, right? We saw positive strokes, negative strokes, and if memory is getting referenced regularly. Sometimes, depending on how we have got those strokes, what kind of transactions have happened, what kind of ego states we have continued to maintain, there can be long-term positions that we get into, right? What is it? One is, I am not okay You are okay, which means that I am not good enough. Someone else is good enough. Or I am okay, you're not okay. That I am good, I know everything. It's the world which doesn't know, which creates trouble. And that's called the one-up position. Okay? Or I am not okay, you're also not okay. Kuch nahi badlega, dunya bhi aisi hai. I am also like this, so hopeless, yaar. I don't know why we are living. What is the purpose of all this? Is the hopeless position. And then there is I am okay, you're okay, which is the, hey, you know what? I'm okay as I am. I'm willing to change. There are things that we can do. And the world is also okay. The world has good people. We are making good progress. When on a long term, this can create, emotional, a kind of states that we maintain. Because if it's I am not okay, if it's if it's coming from I'm not okay, you're okay, people can get depressive because they are uncomfortable with themselves, right? If they are I am also not okay, you're also not okay, it can be futile, right? People may think there is no purpose. They may have this sense of completely no purpose of living, right? And also if it's about I'm okay, you're not okay, if there's a very strong then people may also become paranoid about others people. So extreme stances on all of these will need support of, you may also need to send them to a counselor, because if they're very strongly embedded beliefs that are controlling every aspect of their life. But if they are if you see them as, it operating in some aspects of their life, they're not deeply emotional, the emotions are not so strongly embedded, then this grid is useful for us to see and work with them and shift their grids and shift their belief systems so that they're able to kind of take a more healthier stance. Okay.